Well, hello everybody. Deborah Prinzing. I'm back with the Slow Flowers Show, and today I'm off camera because I've got two guests on camera, and I'm so delighted to welcome Deb Majerus and Joel MacDonald of Iron Butterfly Flower Farm in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm glad you're representing with the hockey jersey there, Joel. And we're reuniting because we met in person at the Slow Flowers Summit in Banff, Alberta. Did you drive, by the way?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know how far that was. But. We're here in my little studio at the ASCFG conference in Albuquerque, and I just couldn't miss an opportunity to do an in-person interview. I've interviewed Deb before for an article in Slow Flowers Journal, but I wanted to learn more about your farm. So thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so how are we going to get started? Would you like to, one of you, maybe Deb, you jump in and give a little, introduce people to Iron Butterfly Flower Farm, and Joel, you jump in and, correct her if she misses something.
Good task here. Okay.
Yes, well, we're located in Rochester, Minnesota, as you said. So that's, if you're not familiar, it's in the southeast corner of Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic, where Joel also works part-time. We have a little over 6 acres, and we farm on about 1 acre. We have about 1 acre in production.
Good. Is your market Rochester and the greater
and the
area?
Twin Cities, yeah. So we're a little over an hour from the Twin Cities. So we do work with a wholesaler in the Twin Cities, and then we sell locally to the farmers market. We have some subscriptions and some local florists that we work with too. So
that's amazing.
So
I
you
love
have
it.
an acre in production, but you have between the gardens up top and your gardens in the back. I mean, there's
yeah, we keep adding more and more.
Are you saying that you're harvesting from your residential garden as well?
well, we have, what do you call it, the garden up closer to the boulevard?
Yeah, we're not on flat farmland like you might think about in Minnesota when you think of cornfields and soybean fields. We have this really pretty hilly property that's partially wooded and backs up to a park. So there's a lot of shaded areas, which there's some things like the hellebores, which I'm planting in the shade, but I'm kind of selecting areas. We have one area they used to have horses on the farm. It's a big sunny pasture. So that's our 1 acre area that's really like our heaviest production.
Your open field kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but then there's some other areas like up along the driveway where I put in a pretty big bed a couple of years ago, and we've been filling that in. And so we've got some pockets where I wouldn't say it's landscaping necessarily, but just outside of that main fenced in area.
Well, Deb, when you and I first connected, I don't know how it happened, but I learned about your emphasis on native plants in this demonstration garden that you put in the front of one of your Airbnb rental or something, and that really intrigued me, and I ended up interviewing you for the Slow Flowers Journal, but we featured it in our 2024 trend report, like our forecast. Like this is native plants are our category that more flower farmers should be exploring, and you were doing that not necessarily from a farming point of view, but just from a land management point of view, right? When you started that?
I would say that was how my interest in native flowers started. Eliminating lawns and replacing them with native flowers, because you support so much of the ecosystem in that way, and then as we started to delve more into the flower farming, we realized that, oh my gosh, these native flowers, you talk about, today at the meeting they were talking about resiliency in your farm, and right plant, right place. Well, what's more adapted to your environment and the extremes of your environment than native plants,
Yeah.
And so it just became important for us to start to try to learn about that from a flower farming perspective. But it was a little frustrating because there's not as much good information. They're just not as popular of a crop, and so it's hard to find out which flowers will do well as a cut flower and have a decent vase life, and what's the ideal stage that I should harvest it at, and how should I process it post-harvest, and how can my florist, the florists aren't used to necessarily working with some of those, and the handling might be different, and so it's just been a challenge to try to gather some of that information, and so I've been slowly gathering that, and we've been planting more and more of them, and they're also great from a pest management standpoint because they bring in a lot of beneficial insects which help control a lot of pests on the property.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
practically
So-
for me, I was responsible for the landscaping and upkeep of it, where I was having to load up lawnmower. We acquired a bigger property than we'd ever had, and we had bigger equipment, and you could spend a lot of hours sitting on a lawnmower burning gasoline, and then to have just one less thing. And the people, if they didn't take care of their lawns next door, you just see it just goes to seed, and it's in dandelions, and it looks
Absolutely,
horrible,
yeah.
and this just sits there and you don't do anything to it.
Like the maintenance on it, you don't have to water, like if you're replacing lawn with natives, you don't have to water it. You don't have to cut it all the time. You don't, like, basically it's just a matter of establishing it. That first year, you need to water it while it establishes,
Sure.
but literally the next year after we planted it, we had one of the worst droughts that we've had in Minnesota, and we designed it so that water from the rooftop would pool into a rain garden and then disperse. We have the channels, so it would sort of disperse through, and that charged the groundwater in that area so much that we never, in the worst drought ever with this only 1-year-old planting, we never had to water it, and it just flourished. And yeah, and it was just
And I think people really respond to that. I think in general, even consumers, we hear the idea of native plants, and we're like, yeah, I want to support that.
Yeah.
I don't know about florists necessarily. I'm curious, is it more likely that a florist would want a foliage, like a foliage from a native shrub or a native perennial, than relying on whether there's a vase life for the bloom? Or
Yeah, definitely. Well, at the Banff conference, we came across wolf willow,
Yes.
which is a native in parts of Minnesota, and and the florists in Canada were just raving about it. So I tried to source some to start a patch at our farm, and in the lower 48, we could not source any plants, but I could source seeds. So anyway, I think that would be a really popular crop. I started seeds last year, and they had really great germination rate. I mean, the plants were like this big last year, but I'm thinking, after a couple more years, hopefully they'll be producing a lot, and that might be a really popular crop.
because they're a perennial.
It was mentioned this morning at the conference about the gal on a farm on the East Coast where there wasn't a market because people didn't know it was there, and that you can create a market. And if people knew more about it and knew that, hey, this doesn't look like a big flashy imported South American plant like they're used to getting and seeing at the grocery store or whatnot, but this is something that's grown right here, and they see the value of it. It's like, oh, this grows right here, and it's drought resistant, and you didn't have to ship it, and hopefully people will catch on and find a way to use it.
I think one of the barriers though sometimes is that sometimes native plants, people will see them growing wild and it's like a ditch weed, and it's like, so.
Why should I pay for it?
Right, yeah.
All right, well, we have a lot of work to do on that, but I do appreciate you bringing that up, in that it is a growing category, and I think you're an early adopter. And I'm curious, are you both Minnesota natives, and is that kind of passion about Minnesota grown maybe infused in your customers?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully, I mean, yeah, very proud Minnesotan, and just like I say, I go back to practical. It always has struck me as kind of the, I don't know, it sounds wrong, but I mean, when you learn that how many flowers come how many miles, and you just think, it just kind of makes my mind break. And like, I grew up looking at the ditchweed tiger lilies that just grew rampant in the ditches of Minnesota, and they were the most beautiful thing.
Wow.
I would try to plant more tiger lilies. They just grow like weeds, but they're lovely, and there's so many of those. If you just take a second to go, those just grow in the ditch, and they're amazing.
That's a wonderful story. Yeah, but they're also good for cut flowers.
Yeah.
I think Minnesotans in general want to support local.
Right.
For sure.
Right. How did this all happen? You have a very fascinating story, and I think a lot of people of a certain age who are clearly like 1 or 2 careers under their belt and come to flower farming, which I'm guessing is something that a lot of our listeners can relate to. How did it happen for you? How did you fall down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, I would say we didn't set out to be flower farmers, but that's where we are.
Happy accident.
Yeah, happy accident. Right?
I like that.
We both had other careers and Joel's from Minnesota, but he went off and disappeared to Alaska for 25 years, and we actually dated in high school, and we stayed in touch for a while, but then we lost touch because there was no Facebook or,
Right.
Alaska's a long ways away.
There was
it is a long way.
You could have been pen pals.
Right. But yeah, so then, we had both gone through divorces and we reconnected. Long story short, we were both back in Rochester, and we were adding on to our garage. And it was December, it was really cold. They had just poured this concrete, and they had these huge propane tank, heaters in there to try to keep it warm while it's set. And Friday the 13th of December, 2019, we had a fire start in the garage.
Oh my gosh.
It woke us up in the middle of the night, and we had to, it luckily didn't destroy the entire house, but we had enough smoke damage and roof damage that,
destroyed the entire
we had
house.
to basically gut everything. And, so we were displaced out of that house, and luckily, but okay, and everything. But so that's when this property that we're on now, the 6 acres, was actually just down the street from where we were living. And it had been for sale, and we ended up buying this property, not thinking we're going to start a flower farm. And then COVID hit at that same time.
Literally 3 months later, you poor
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, it was
my
a
gosh.
lot.
Just to add, you can drive by the farm now, our Iron Butterfly Farm, 1,000 times and not know it's there. And every time somebody comes back to the farm now, or people visit for the first time, they're like, where did this come from? It's surrounded by a Corey Hill Nature Center and some private and woodlands. Nobody knows it's there. People who live in Rochester had no idea that it existed, and nor did we.
Yeah, talk about a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's just this magical place.
Yeah.
And it's zoned agricultural.
Yeah.
As an island surrounded by the city entirely, but it's zoned ag. So,
What had been there before on the 6 acres?
well, they had horse pasture. The previous owners, it was generational. Granddaddy had farmed it and then built the farmstead of the house we live in the mid-70s, and they had horses and crops, and he owned a big chunk of
He
Haverhill
was a
Township.
builder, yeah.
But they had farmed it, and he was a contractor and did stuff. So he'd just been slowly kind of parceling it off piece by piece.
His son, yeah. And they thought it was going to be developed because there's a lot of development around, and then here we come in and decide, no, we're going to keep it like this. We're gonna,
What did you think you were going to do with that land? Because you both were working other careers, right?
Yeah. So I was an endodontist for almost 20 years, and so but I grew up on a farm, and then living in the country, and so and you grew up in the city of Rochester, but then lived in Alaska forever and out in the middle of nowhere. So having like a little land around us.
You were drawn to that.
Yes, it totally just was a peaceful place for us.
Our house in Rochester was very close to a road that when we were kids was a very lightly traveled country road that was way on the edge of town. And then in the 30-something years I was gone, it had been developed and expanded, and it was a main thoroughfare up to the new high school and subdivisions. And her house that was built in the 60s, the one that burned, sat right on the road. It was a 45-mile-an-hour, and when school was in session, it was a steady stream of cars with high school kids going to school, and it was just like, ah!
It wasn't peaceful the way your
couldn't-
childhood Rochester felt.
I rode my bike, it was gravel, and I hunted grouse and pheasant out there.
Yeah.
And now it was this neighborhood, and it's just like, progress.
Yeah.
But this property the farm sits back, set off the
Off
road,
the road,
and then
yeah.
the trees, and you're not in town
That's
anymore.
lovely.
It was very
And then it backs
appealing.
up to parkland, and we have a church on one side, so it's not, it's just, it feels bigger even than it is,
And you really just were trying to create peace and calmness after some trauma.
Oh, yeah. We'd been through, even before the fire, kind of a difficult divorce that I'd gone through more recently than Joel, and then, the fire, and then we bought this property in February. Our dog died at the beginning of March, one of our dogs, and then the pandemic shut everything down, and I had my business, in healthcare, right, and so people think, I don't know, you might not think about dentists as sort of being on these front lines, but as an endodontist, I did root canal treatment, which is, you have a toothache and a horrible infection, and you can't wait a month for your dental office to reopen.
Or 3 years.
So it's an
Right.
it's an emergency situation, right?
So we weren't we shut down, everybody shut down, for like a week or two, and then we were the ones that reopened right away to see all these emergency people while everyone else tried to figure out what to do, So then I was stressed about, about that.
Of
And
course.
the team, we were all worried. That was, at the beginning, you didn't know, like, how is this going to, how are we going to catch this? Because we're working, like, this far away from someone's
I remember,
mouth,
yes, I remember that when I worried about my dentist and the whole staff there, because they're like 6 inches away from
Yes.
all your germs.
Exactly,
We
yeah.
experimented with all kinds. We didn't know what was out there yet. We were I was trying to build prototypes of splatter shields in my shop.
Because we're creating aerosol,
Vacuum.
which is what you do when you sneeze, So as we're working in their mouth, we're making all these little droplets going
Oh
there.
my gosh. Was your health, did you get through that okay, or did you?
Yes,
okay.
yes. Thankfully, yes. In retrospect, it was fine, but at the time it was very stressful. And then, unfortunately, my best friend that I was roommates with all through dental school for 4 years committed suicide in May at the beginning of the
Oh,
pandemic.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
So much.
Oh, it was, and then that same week my dad went into the hospital for congestive heart failure. Like, it just, all these things piled up, right? And we were just like, I was just in a dark, like, it was just a hard time, So we were very grateful that we weren't in an apartment in New York City and we had 6 acres of land. And as soon as spring came, so like spring, well, like in May actually, when my friend Laura passed, like I went out and planted seeds that day,
Wow.
and that was our first spring on the farm, and we hadn't even thought about flower farming yet, but we were just like, we're gonna grow a garden, we're gonna have some fruit, and we're gonna have some veggies and some flowers, and it saved me, like being out there in my garden just
Right.
saved
When I first came back and visited you, I mean, you came to Alaska quite a few times, and I came back a couple times before we settled. You had obviously, on your first property there on Viola Road, had put so much time and energy and focus into the landscaping and the garden, and you could tell it was your happy place.
To keep a beautiful environment for
As
yourself.
the divorce was killing
That's so
you,
true. It was
you just threw yourself at planting, and it was lovely. You made a really
and there were a
nice
lot of
space.
native plants on that property already. It was a beautiful,
It's
it
kind
called
of
it my
circular.
little oasis, because
Well, I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying. Deb, you sent me an email about a little bit of the background, and this sentence jumped out at me when you said, I was in a dark place for a while, and spending time outside in my new garden literally helped to save me.
Yeah.
And so that was just it. On that 6 acres, you could just be out there with your dogs, and
Yep.
as Joel said, in snowshoes.
I would get sick of being in the house, and I was working little, and we had a little bit of a winter that year, surprisingly, and the property was brand new, and I would go out every morning and put on snow, and I just made a path, and it would take, it's six acres, but it would take, 20 something minutes
Sure.
to walk the perimeter and just like get to know the place and get out, and Deb calls it my
which is a
bluster.
big part of farming is just getting to know your property and like where does the water go?
Observing.
Yeah.
Well, that was in 2020 that you acquired the land, but then you started the farm in 2021, right?
Yes, correct.
And
Yep.
what is the origin of the name Iron Butterfly?
Oh yeah.
I know, I think I
Talking
know,
about this.
but
Yeah, well, we were on our back deck just brainstorming, like, what are we gonna call this space, and Joel, he loves language, and he's a writer also, and he's always been like a Led Zeppelin fan, and he always likes that Led and Zeppelin, what's the term for
Heavy
that?
and light.
Yeah, and it makes me think of steel magnolias,
yes, yes.
And so I think you were the one, well, so my work family, and as an endodontist, gave me this little sculpture that we had by the front door, which was all these butterflies made out of recycled metal. And I think that partly inspired you you came up with Iron
You're a big
Butterfly.
butterfly fan, and
Yeah, I love butterflies.
I'm the iron, you're the butterfly.
Oh,
Yeah. So we wanted something that was going to have masculine and feminine. And you said it. You said Iron Butterfly. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect, And
And ironically, I had the album. I was a big 70s.
I was just gonna say, it's an album, right?
it is. So I didn't even know
It's
that
very
it was
famous.
a
Iron Butterfly was a
band.
band. And
I can picture it. I love that.
They're famous. They had the song Inagata Davida, which
Right.
is 23 minutes, one whole side of an album. And I bought it as in like a junior high school, and it's fairly horrible. It's really heavily drug induced, and it's okay, but it's heavy. It was kind of interesting at that age. And I later on learned the story that they were so stoned out of their minds, they were trying to say "in the Garden of Eden,"
Yeah.
and they
Oh,
were
so
too
Inagata
baked
Davida's
to
a-
say it. And I came out in a Gata Divita by Aaron Boyd, and I thought, in the Garden of Eden.
You're reclaiming that title.
Yes,
Butterfly,
right?
and it just all
Yes.
kind of.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as, because I started Googling iron butterfly then, and it's also, there's poetry and there's feminist writings, and there's been political, or not political, but military operations
Wow.
by that name. So it's a lot of things besides the band, but it just like.
You're claiming it for your own definition.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. So I just brought that up to ask, like, when did you check the box and say, okay, we're all in, we're going to start a flower farm?
Yeah, I would say it was that summer, though, of 21. We did the garden, we started putting in the garden. We'd learned a lot about permaculture, and I'm kind of one of those people, when I find a new topic I'm interested in, I just dive in, and start reading all these books and going online and taking, there's a Midwest permaculture. Anyway.
She's a fanatic.
Yeah.
You're
So there was another farmer locally, a small farmer, who was a permaculture farm, and I was like, can I come meet you and see your farm? I want to see this in practice more. And she was growing a patch of flowers for her florist friend, and I think said something about flower farming, even though she's not a flower farm, but that, I was like, flower farming. And then, then I found you very quickly.
As I say, off she
slow
went.
flowers movement, yes. And I was like, oh, I love this, because we had just read a book about slow food, and then in that we'd actually even thought for a short time about having a market garden with vegetables.
Like culinary, for culinary customers,
and then as soon as I came across the slow flowers idea, I was like, oh, we have to do this.
Well, and when and it's funny you say that, Deb, because my background is horticulture and gardening as a writer. And so I kind of came to floral from the same point of view. Like, well, I'm a gardener. How hard can it be to just, go deep into the floral world? Now, obviously, we know it's completely different, but
yes.
You're a farmer, but it's different.
Right, but you didn't lack, you felt confident. Like, I know how to grow plants.
Yeah, well, so I took the floret class, like I think a lot of newer flower farmers do, and I was trying to be realistic that, okay, I have this whole other career that I plan to be in for a while, and he's working, I thought, I know peonies grow really well in Minnesota, and they're a perennial crop, so as we age, we're not spring chickens, as we age, that would be something that would be easier for us, so I thought, well, I can do that. I wasn't even thinking all these other things. I was thinking, well, we could plant peonies. We could grow peonies, and then, but as you know, as soon as you start to dive into that world, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I could grow this and I could grow that, and so then we started to kind of dive into some other crops and experiment and just learn. It's just fun to learn. But then
you're talking
kind
about
of
your grandma's peonies that were 75 or 100 years old at
Yes.
the house in Alba.
yes,
that you just
I have
remember those.
peonies, some peonies, a few that were my grandma's.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
the
that.
gateway drug for
Yeah.
so many. Having been in Alaska, did you ever come across a peony farming in Alaska?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into exactly how, because it's kind of, there was a guy in the very small town that I lived in who had been kind of a mentor of mine, and we were carpenters, and we trapped and hunted and fished, and he kind of was almost like an older brother type to kind of show me the ropes, and he was getting older and more out. He was a little bit older than me, and he came up with this, what I thought of at the time was just the most cockamamie thing ever, that he was going to start a peony farm. And I was just like, what are you talking about,
I remember those early days.
And it was they're like, Alaska's the perfect place, and everybody's doing a peony farm, and there's this big agricultural region of Delta Junction across the way, and he threw himself, there was an old Vietnam vet that had lived in town, kind of a crazy recluse who it was called the Wild Rose Ranch, and he did birch syrup and made wine and grew flowers, and he had bison and had a little flower patch. And
a homesteader.
This neighbor, yeah, totally a homesteader. He changed his name after Vietnam and
moved to Alaska.
Which was
I
pretty
love it.
common.
Yeah.
And he had started this ranch, this farm, and then this neighbor of mine, and I was like, you're that crazy. And he was going to go, this is going to be the next thing. Everybody wants peonies, and they happen at a certain time of year. And I thought it was kind of ludicrous, but it was totally a thing where I was kind of made aware of.
Okay, so how many peonies did you buy in addition to your grandmother's
Yes.
to get planted?
Well, I think the first bunch we put in was maybe 250, but then the next year we put in a lot more and then more. And so we have over 1,000 now.
Wow.
Which is a lot, which if you think, oh, if I get even 10 stems off of those, each of those, that's 10,000 cut peonies that we're gonna have to sell, So this year we're gonna have, so last year was when that first 250 started to come into production. So it takes years, to first figure out which varieties do I want, where do I get them in large quantities and source them and plant them and then wait for them to mature. So during that whole process, we were like, well, what else? We gotta generate some money for this business. My accountant's gonna say like, where's, and plus we just love, it's just fun. Drinking from a fire hose, they're just so much, it's so different than just landscaping, and
right.
So, yeah, we started putting in a lot of people, like foliage and woodies, and woodies serve such a nice purpose because it goes with that permaculture aspect of like you're also supporting the birds, which also are going to eat the bugs, and and the windbreaks, and we do have some wind like that kind of comes through this little valley where we are, and so last year actually we had a windstorm and. The areas where the windbreaks were mature, the peonies did really well. And the area where we had just planted a windbreak and it was tiny, they really got hit. And I was like, oh, please don't die, because they were only like on their second season or something,
And so, they represent a lot of future income.
Yes, right.
but they are a perfect crop for zone 4B which is where you are. So you also had to think about what works with my place.
Right, yes, because we're colder than, as I started learning about flower farming, I'm realizing all these people are in warmer places than I am. Even ones that are north, but they're on the coast, it's more, like there's
more moderate,
Right, like I think I hear like zone 5 is a lot, like the coldest that I'll usually hear people talk about, Although, so there are, growers in Canada that, even Canada can be warmer than where we are, but, there are some in zone 3 that I started listening to and learning from because, we just have such a shorter growing season. We can't do a lot of the cool flowers, that like Lisa Mason Ziegler talks about. We can do a few, but we can't, unless you have a hoop house or something, you can't grow a lot of those in the field and they won't survive the winter, So are
you all field now, or you have a structure, right?
Well, we are just putting in the hoop house. We put the framer for the hoop house in at the end of the season, and we're gonna stretch the plastic over it now in the very early spring and plant ranunculus in there. Yeah, because I hadn't grown ranunculus. It is a little more daunting, and last year I trialed some, under a low tunnel. And I got my confidence enough to say, okay, and the wholesaler loved it, and she's like, I could sell so much more of these. So I said, okay, I will try to, we'll put up this hoop house and we'll see how it goes. So we're doing that this year.
And will you heat that, Deb, or?
So no, it'll be an unheated hoop house.
Okay.
And we're just thinking single layer plastic, because you can do a double layer, but you have to have electricity with a fan that constantly blows air to keep those layers separated.
Oh, you were mentioning that on the meetup last week. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I was like, okay, do we need? And I have a friend who overwinters ranunculus in a double layer hoop house, but I don't know anyone in Minnestota I don't even know if anyone's ever tried to overwinter them in a single layer hoop house. So I've been trying to find out that information, and it's just hard to find, so. I'm going to have to experiment with it and, maybe report back about how that goes.
Right. So right now, I can't believe you have 1,000 peonies. So is that your biggest category?
Yes.
And then
sure.
what would be your other major categories?
Yeah. Well, hellebores is one that we started adding more and more because they bloom in early spring for us. I'm always jealous. They're blooming for you right now, but they bloom in early spring for us, which is when everybody's excited about flowers, and they're perfect for our wedding season.
It's wonderful, and they're a value add.
Yes,
they're not like a commodity crop. There's a perceived
Not
upcharge.
many people are growing them
right.
around here. Well, we do have a lot of narcissus because that also does well in our zone, and it's early when everybody's excited for them. I did some tulips. I experimented with tulips, but I decided, the profit margin is tricky with tulips, and there's so many other people around us that are growing them at a much bigger scale than me. I'm like, I'll just buy some tulips from you. Right. Or I'll plant. I do have some that I planted in the ground to try to perennialize, and I thought, maybe I could get some short stems to sell at the farmer's market, and they'll still, without cutting all the foliage back, maybe I can, make that work, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Pretty labor intensive from my point of view.
Yeah, whereas
Yes.
compared to the daffodils, right? I think what I'm learning is, so now you're entering your 5th season? Wait, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. This is your 6th season you're entering. You're like, you're experienced farmers now, and you're making decisions.
I don't know if I feel it, but I've learned a lot.
You're making decisions for the long haul, and that seems like the peonies are going to reward you for that.
Yes, I think so, and people do love them. They're so, even though people can grow them in their yards, like we have lots of different varieties that they might not, be growing, lots of specialty varieties that we've invested in, so it's not just kind of, we certainly have lots of wedding, white and blush and, pink, but we have a lot of corals and salmons, and I even invested in some pasteligans, which are gorgeous. Expensive, but gorgeous. And, the yellows and the,
So you're pretty much able to sell them mostly wholesale, but also, do you sell
we're
the farmer's
sell
market?
a lot at the farmer's market too. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which farmer's market is it?
It's the Rochester.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm, yep.
And do you have customers like that you went to high school with and old hometown friends?
Yeah.
Co-workers are like, what are you, people that don't know that I do this from the hospital, and they'll come by and they're like, Joel, what are you doing sitting out here? And I'm like, I'm selling peonies.
Basically, I work 7 days a week, all right?
But it's been super fun as I learn about it, just, as a total non-flower person previously, and people would say, oh, the peonies are the ants. You hear
right.
me, like, oh, you grow peonies. Oh, they had the ant.
Yes.
My grandma had them, and they bring them in, there'd be ants all over the counter. And then as soon as they bloom, it rains and they fall over the very next day. So they're only pretty for 22 hours. And
so you're having to debunk all these.
Yes,
right, and it's like, I'm not a super expert on it by any means. And I said, it's like, now we've kind of learned some tricks on how to, this is how you do it. If you try to buy our peonies, because if you keep them in the cooler, the ants, and the ants aren't bad. The ants are a good thing for the peonies, it's not a pest.
So people believe you, they listen to you because
they do.
you're...
I know just a little bit about it, but I can tell people, the ants are integral to the whole thing, and then they go, oh, all right, and it kind of changes
and actually
their
a lot
behavior.
of bees that it eats at.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time left, so there's 2 things I definitely want to talk about before we wrap up. And also, if I skip something, please let me know. But you've got some fun projects planned for what you're going to, roll out in 2026. So I'd love to hear about that. And the other thing I just want to ask is, when did you retire from being an endodontist and go like, okay, this is it. I'm putting on a new hat now and wearing a different name badge.
It was, I guess, late in 2024 that I had a diagnosis of an autoimmune arthritis, and I'd also been having, a lot of dentists suffer from myofascial pain, which I've been also dealing with. So anyway, long story short, this autoimmune, especially started to interfere with my ability to practice, and so I cut back, and then I had to just stop, and it was a really hard decision, obviously, but I'm so glad that I have the flowers to be able to help fill in that gap. Yeah, but also at the same time, it's affected my ability to flower farm. Like, it's a physical, so the idea, my original vision of having that spring season with lots of perennials, which you don't have to replant every year, just the physical labor part of it, keeping that to a minimum and manageable has become really important, to us going forward, to me. So part of the joy that I get from the farm after the spring rush is over is just, I've learned about so many of these artsy, a lot of dentists have an artistic background, and we, I just love, first photographing the flowers, and then I was learning about, cyanotype. I started learning about cyanotype,
wow.
sun printing and pressing flowers, and I made a little block carving of our logo and was block printing on fabric, and you can just go off on that, and I'll create all kinds of fun things, and anyway, so I was just I was learning in dried flowers, at your conference in Banff, I learned a lot more about dried flowers, and I've done a lot more with that, and played with those, and And so I thought, what I can do in the off season or like after that spring rush is I want to share some of this with the community. And so I put together this little series of workshops. I'm just calling it the art of seasonal flowers, and incorporating all those things I just talked about, paint, like watercolors, just lots of different ideas, and we'll see what's most popular, I guess, but I get a lot of joy from that, and I think that people want to come to the farm, so they can see the farm, they'll tour the farm, and then we'll have a workshop, and they can bring some flowers home if they want, or they'll for sure have their creative, project that they did. And
I love that. So you've already posted the calendar for the Art of Seasonal Flowers.
I have.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We'll share that link. And I think I love that you're doing this, because I feel like the people who help their customers connect with flowers in as many ways as possible, you're like investing in a future customer who's going to keep coming back.
Yeah.
So you're empowering them to enjoy flowers more than just putting them in a vase.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I was thinking this morning at our conference, the emphasis on women, and it just kind of becomes a default. And after the conference in Banff with you, and I can't remember the gal's name, the Japanese gal.
Oh, Hitomi
It
Gilliam.
was so amazing, and that is
Yeah.
just. And I was thinking, as I get more time, I'm just like the designing places to hold flowers. Something that's, I'm not gonna say more masculine or something that men find more interest. That I just absolutely found it fascinating.
No,
be
with
able to
with your skill set, you could engineer some of those
Right,
mechanics.
and that was
Okay,
to
we
get
want
more people
those.
involved. I want to do some more. I have all the stuff I save on the farm. Chicken wire and all the raw materials, and it's just so. Her creative is different, and I think I want to build archways and trellises and things.
Yeah.
And
What a great
to get
collaboration.
more people
Yeah.
interested of all genders. And
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And also maybe create another revenue stream for, renting out those things or.
it's fun to do. That's fun for me.
I love it. I love it that you came, and there were definitely only about a half a dozen guys at that Banff conference, and I was, yes, this is a farming conference, it's a different thing, but I'm really glad that you both came, and
Yeah, it was great.
and that you jumped in and did all the dried flower workshop with Heather, and that experience, because this is why you can talk knowledgeably about flowers at the farmer's market.
I hope so.
Yes, yeah.
Or say, she'll listen to her.
So this is really your off season, but as soon as you get back to Minnesota, it's getting the plastic on that structure.
Getting the plastic on there. We'll be starting to soak the ranunculus corms, in February, or late January, early February. Just some seed start. I did a lot of seed starting in the last few years, doing less of that as we do less annuals, but there's still some seed starting that I'll do, and
Sure.
I do enjoy some of that.
But propagation with the perennials, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you're doing divisions and.
Yes, and I haven't yet, but I want to do more, take cuttings from more of the woodies and propagate them.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
It'll never
there's
end.
always- right, it's always something new and fascinating, and honestly too, one of the things that brings me a lot of the joy is the science of farming and growing and
I feel like you both bring that to it, but you also bring, it's like Iron Butterfly. You bring the kind of soft arts and the hard arts. This has been so much fun. I could just keep going, and I guess it means I need to come visit you in Minnesota.
No spare room.
Okay, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Oh, not that I can think of. Just thank
Thanks
you
for having
so
us.
much for having us.
Oh,
It's
my
great
pleasure.
to see you in person, and just thank you for all you do.
I am inspired by your deep curiosity in the natural world, and I think that is what your customers respond to and the market responds to, because you are in a more challenging location than most people. So I kind of feel like you can be the person who says, if I can do it,
Right.
you can have a garden too. You can have flowers too. So here's to 2026. I'm excited to see how your series works out.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you.